Welcome to the Therapist Thrival Guide. My name is Miranda. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Lucas Volini.
Hello.
LMFT.
Yep.
You always say hello before I finish your title.
I'm eager.
Yeah, jumping right in.
Yeah.
Today, we are talking about children's mental health and specifically talking about play therapy. And so we brought on Neal, who is a registered play therapist.
Hello.
Neal, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've been working in the mental health field for, 13 years now. Yeah. I started out doing in-home, what do we call like caseworker stuff?
Yeah.
Here it was called BHIS back in Iowa, where I'm from.
It was called what?
It's called BHIS, so Behavioral Health Intervention Services.
Okay.
And I was a BHISP, which is a Behavioral Health Intervention Services provider.
Okay.
Going in home teaching skills.
Is that like a CTSS worker in Minnesota?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So I did that for a while. I kept asking questions of my supervisor whenever I'd have my monthly one-on-ones, and she'd be like, you don't need to worry about that. You're just a skills person. That's the therapist job.
Sure.
I'm like, but I want to worry about that. I want to know what that is. So
Yeah.
I went back, I got my master's, and while I was getting my master's, so like almost concurrently, I started doing training for play therapy.
Okay, cool. How did you know that was what you wanted to dive right into?
I didn't.
Oh, really?
No. I mean, I worked with kids already, so I knew I wanted to work with young people. And I got hooked up into play therapy because I went to a friend's wedding.
Okay.
Strangely enough. Friend of mine who...
Sat at the kids' table?
No. No, a friend of mine was getting married at the local community theater, which I volunteered at. I've been in plays and musicals and all that stuff. And someone who I'd been in shows with sat down next to me at the reception, which I've told her this story repeatedly, which actually upset me at the time because I didn't know who she was.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, my wife is supposed to sit next to me. Who are you? And why are you sitting there?
Uh-huh.
And she's talking, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And then I hear someone say her name, which is Terry, and I'm like, wait, you're kind of a big deal in the mental health world as far as play therapy goes. And so we started talking, and she's like, I think you...
Wait. What's her name?
Yeah.
Her name's Terry Kottman.
Okay.
So she's the creator of adlerian play therapy. She invented it. She's written several books. Her and I have co-written a couple things together.
Oh, my gosh.
But anyway, so after we kind of more officially met, we'd met each other before, but after it was more official, she's like, can we talk sometime? Because I think I know something that you would really like. And so we met at a coffee shop in Cedar Falls, Iowa.
Which one?
Cup of Joe.
Oh, nice. I went on many dates with my husband there.
Yeah. So she asked me there, she's like, so tell me about your background. What do you want to do? How do you approach seeing clients? And
you were still in grad school at this point?
I was still in grad school. And I was determined not to be adlerian.
Okay.
Because my father, who's a clinical psychologist, is adlerian, and I'm just like, I want to be different.
And he's like one of the ideological Adlerians.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything's Adler.
Yeah. So then she starts talking, and then she's talking about adlerian play therapy, and I'm like, okay. And after she hears how I approach things, she's like, I think you're adlerian.
Okay, what is it? So, let's dive into that a little bit more. What does adlerian mean? What does adlerian play therapy mean?
Sure. So Adler developed individual psychology, I think is what it's called, which is, he was an offshoot of Freud, as all of them were. He believed in a few core tenets. He believed in the basic goodness of people. He believed that a person's lifestyle is an encompassing of who they are, so how they view self, others, the world. And the lifestyle assessment that he developed is one of the most comprehensive, in my opinion, measures of a person that there is. Even today, I use it. Because you're going to be looking at birth order, you're going to be looking at family atmosphere, you're going to be looking at functioning at life tasks, personality priorities, these things called crucial C's. He likes things in groups of 4. So there's all kinds of things that you look at. So it's not just saying, oh, you have trauma because of family. You have, this one, we're going to focus on this area of your psyche. I think it's really all encompassing. So Adlerian play therapy started because the dominant form of play therapy is child-centered play therapy, which is based on Rogers' work. And it's very non-directive.
Non-directive meaning?
Meaning that if I'm purely child-centered, person's going to walk into my office and I'm going to track them. I'm going to narrate what they're doing. I'm going to narrate what they're saying. I'm going to give them unconditional positive regard. And that's it.
You're not going to be like, let's read this book today.
No.
You're not going to be like, how do you feel about sand tray? Let's do this.
Yeah. If they go to the sand tray, great. It's there. But I'm not going to prompt it.
Yep. You're just following the kid's lead.
Yes.
Okay. So then how does adlerian, how is that different?
So Terry always tells this story, and I love it so much, so I repeat it a lot. When she was developing it, she basically had a client who said to her, I don't want to butcher the accent, but it was in Texas.
Okay.
This little girl just says, why is it when we're in the room with all the toys, you tell me what, like you say what I'm doing, and I already know that because I did it. And you tell me what I'm saying, and I already know that too because I said it. Can you just play with me?
Can you just not narrate everything I'm doing?
Yeah. And she was just like, yeah, I can do that. So I like Adler because it's so like, okay, of all the theories of play therapy that I've seen, it is the most flexible. Do we do the tracking, the narrating sometimes? Yeah. In phase 1 of Adlerian play therapy, absolutely. But then we move into, okay, now I'm going to assess your lifestyle. So I might let's do an activity that's going to let me know what your family's like. Let's do something that's going to let me know how confident you are in yourself.
What sort of activities would help you know some of those different things?
I'm going to give the Adlerian answer, which is going to say it depends. But no. So family atmosphere, a lot of times people will default to what's called like a kinetic family something, drawing a sand tray, a sculpture. I've done it with Lego people, that kind of thing.
Have the kid build or draw something so then you see who's in their family.
If I want to assess, so the crucial C's, for instance, which is, I always forget one. Count, courage, connect. And I always forget one. And it's always different. Count's usually the one I forget, but lately it's been something else. There's 4 of them.
Should we Google it?
Maybe. No, I don't know. It'll be okay.
Come to you.
It'll come to me later. But so if I want to do courage, so I'm like, how courageous is someone? Maybe I'll introduce something they've never seen before and see how they react to it. How willing are they to jump into it? I could be as direct as saying, we're going to do a sand tray, and I want you to place figures in there that when you feel courageous, what does that look like using a sand tray? Storytelling, a lot of times, I can figure that out. I'll be like, okay, tell me a story with a beginning, middle, and end. Which a lot of kids can't do anymore.
So when you first start doing play therapy with kids, you're assessing them through these different steps. Do you also do more like quantitative assessments, like the SCARED assessment or PHQ-9, GAD-7 sort of things? Yeah,
I do all of that at the beginning.
And like
usually.
the diagnostic assessment.
The diagnostic assessment, sure, I do all that.
Yeah.
It's all informative. Because it can give me a direction to go. Because I don't believe in... Because when it comes to planning the session, for example, I don't think that... First of all, I don't think it's best practice, and I don't even think it's that ethical if you're just going to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. I really don't. I want to be intentional. Now, that doesn't mean that it's always going to go that way, because when you work with kids, I can have a plan and be like, this is what we're going to do, and then they come in, and that's not what we're going to do. Right. So you have to be flexible and spontaneous. Have to is probably a strong word. That's what I think
if you work with kids, you have to be flexible, right?
Right. But again, according to some theoretical perspectives, it's like, no, I'm always going to be, again, if you're child-centered, you're always going to be non-directive.
Which can almost become directive.
Almost. Yeah. But yeah, that's what, so there's a lot of different things that I would go to as far as interventions, depending on what I want to do for assessing lifestyle, there's this thing where I have a game called Dixit, which I never actually use it for its intended purpose.
Okay, I've heard of this game.
It's a game with a bunch of cards with a lot of images on them, and they're all different, and they're all interesting. And so there's something where it's almost like a sand tray where I'll take a pile and be like, here, pick some that attract you and some that repel you. So what are the ones that you like? What don't you like? And the ones that you don't care about. Get rid of the ones you don't care about, and then we look for patterns in the ones that you liked and didn't like. And I'll just start making guesses instead of asking questions. So instead of saying, oh, well, I might ask what drew you to this card first, and then I'll say, okay, it kind of sounds like I'm kind of feeling like this is what you're being drawn toward, or I'm kind of wondering if this is what you're thinking with this. Because if you ask, especially with kids, if you start just questioning over all, throwing them questions, you're gonna lose them, or you're gonna get a lot of I don't knows.
Sure.
But if I make guesses and I'm wrong, they're gonna tell me, and I've still learned something. And if I make guesses and I'm right, usually I'll get silence or some kind of cue that I'm like, oh, okay. So I mean, that's, oh my gosh, and I go on and on technique wise.
No, I love that.
So there are like certain aspects and domains you want to address, and then you just come up with your own creative, spontaneous ways of getting that information or creating that experience where the kiddo will be able to act out what it is you're looking to assess for.
Because I think the thing important to remember with play therapy is the play is the intervention.
Yeah.
A lot of people view play therapy as a way to trick kids into talking.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just not play therapy. My prime example is like, okay, the Jenga tower where you pull the thing and there's a question on it.
Yeah.
It's fine, but it's not play therapy. You're just tricking the kid into talking. So something that I have to explain to parents a lot, because kid will leave the office and be like, I played. And so they'll be like, what are you even doing? I'll be like, you have to remember, the kid's primary form of communication until about the age of 12 is action, not words. So I want to be able to be there, number one, to give them the environment to play out whatever they want. Nowadays, kids have so many restrictions on even how they can play.
Yeah.
I have parents come in who are just, oh my gosh, they're so aggressive. Okay. In their play. I'm like, okay. They're 5. They're playing, playing out stuff they've seen in movies and TV and video games on the playground. I think they know the difference between reality and play, but that's something else you explore too. It's like, okay, are you, how much does your metaphor stay there, and does it bleed into reality for you at all?
Well, and play is so much more than just rapport building. I appreciated what you just said about how that is their primary language. That's how they communicate with the world. It's how they process the world. And it gives you so much insight into what they've been thinking about recently. I had a kid that came in. I mean, I see one kiddo that's 6, and consistently the last few weeks, all she wants to do is play out like these dolls, and one of them is pregnant and having a baby, and like she just wants to play that. And I mean, before mom even told me that she was pregnant, I knew, because the kid was just playing it out constantly and talking about it.
Was the kid supposed to know that mom was pregnant?
No, the kid knew.
Oh,
yeah,
the kid knew.
Yeah. And it wasn't like a secret, but
I always think it's interesting when the kid, like the parents are like, oh, like, mom's pregnant, but they haven't told the kids yet, but the kid already knows.
That's so funny.
Because kids know way more.
Oh, yeah.
Than parents think they do.
What common diagnoses are you seeing? And like, what do you feel like play therapy is good for?
Sure. Common diagnoses I see. Okay. I see a lot of anxiety. See a lot of depression.
Are there age ranges of kids you see?
I see. So I will go all the way to 2.
Okay.
If they're 2 or 3, typically that's with parents. And I'll go all the way. I think my oldest client that I've ever had and done play therapy with was 70.
Oh, see, this is part of what I want to get into later too. It's just like doing play therapy with adults, but okay, that's helpful to know.
Yeah. So common diagnoses, I see a lot of anxiety, see a lot of depression. I used to see a lot of oppositional defiant. back in Iowa. I'd seen less of it up here. I don't know why.
I wonder if that's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Or like even like a graduate program training thing.
Maybe.
Because I know a lot of faculty, at least the faculty I know throughout this state, kind of share the opinion on oppositional defiant disorder, that it's just something to not pathologize a kid with.
Yeah. There are, for the most part, I think a lot of times when terms like that are thrown around, I don't want to go there. There's a couple times where I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. Kid who's destroying property, setting stuff on fire, being violent daily. Okay. But the kid who gets in a fight in the playground every now and then, no. ADHD is another one. Although, again, one that I don't always like to go right to, especially if the kid's under 6, because number one, you can't diagnose an under 6. People want to. People do, but that's not, kid's hyper, therefore.
Kids should be.
Kids should be hyper.
Yeah, it's like, have you seen a puppy?
Yeah. So those are the ones I probably see most. Some PTSD.
Okay. And do you feel like play therapy is a good modality for all of these diagnoses?
100%. Yes.
So let's dive into this a little bit more. What are some interventions that you see with play therapy? What do you like about play therapy?
Oh, geez, what do I like about it? First of all, I like that like I said earlier, play is the native language of children. So you're talking in their native language. You're giving them a space, because you're talking in their native language, that means that they're allowed to express what they want, how they want. And outside of, like, in my playroom, for instance, there aren't very many rules. It's basically just, let's try and respect each other and don't break my stuff. Beyond that, it's whatever.
It's whatever it needs to be for the kiddo.
Yeah. I've had kids who apologize sometimes. They'll be like, oh, this I was rough with this, or these characters are being kind of mean. And I'm like, that's okay. You do what you need to do. But yeah, depending on, so intervention wise, I mean, because you asked what do I almost like what my go-to is, kind of.
Yeah.
And that's like picking who's your favorite kid.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm just thinking, like, if you're interested in becoming a play therapist or involving some play therapy into your practice, what are some tools or games? I mean, you mentioned Dixit, that's a good one. What are some things that people should be stocking up on, I guess?
Yeah. So that helps. If you're just looking at, because here's the thing, you can do play therapy and not be a registered play therapist. You just can't say you're a registered play therapist. That's an important note. That's a very important thing. Because I've known people when I've taken classes who just took the classes to know the techniques. They didn't want the certification.
Yep.
But so some kind of basic interventions that I've kind of used. So kinetic family drawing is one, which I mentioned earlier. You could also do that with stickers. So it's like, okay, make your family, draw them however you want. In whatever, like, I've seen kinetic family drawings of instruments. Every family member was a different instrument. Of fish in an aquarium, of animals in a zoo.
I love that.
People.
Yeah.
It just depends.
Yeah.
Or person doesn't want to draw, stickers. I should own stock in Hobby Lobby or Michael's because I go there all the time just for stickers. Sandtray, I'll get into Sandtray later, but I would say that's not. Sandtray is a more advanced skill. I love it, so I'll talk about that later. But as far as just dipping your toe in, I probably wouldn't go that route. I tell a lot of people, like, get a dollhouse with some family figures, miniatures. Try and get something that's looking more gender neutral. Because I've had dollhouses that are bright pink and boys won't go near them. Even if I say there's no such thing as a
girl dollhouse.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I try and do that.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot. So doing like family sculpting using figures. Obviously, if the whole family's in, I'll have them get up and be like, okay, sculpt each, like if you're the sculptor, okay, everyone, you're clay. They get to position you however they want. Show me what an average day in your house looks like. But if the family's not there, I do it with figures. I do it with miniatures. Games. So I use tabletop games a lot, and a few that I really like. So there's one called Zombie Dice.
Zombie dice?
Zombie Dice, yep. It's a cup with 13 dice in it. And basically, it's a press your luck game where you're rolling dice to try and get brains because you're the zombies. So you want to eat brains. Yeah. And if you go to but there's also these little explosion-y symbols like booms. And if you roll too many of those, you lose all your brains.
So it's like Farkle.
It's like Farkle,
okay.
Yeah. You keep going until you either say stop or until you get 3 explosions and then you just don't get anything. Why I use that? Number one, it's easy. It's fast. Number two, it's fun. And number three, it's about knowing when to quit. That is something very telling for me. I've had kids who will roll 2 booms and no brains, so you have nothing to lose, but they stop. Because they're like, I'm not going to get anything. And I'm like, wow. So you really don't, they're already really down on themselves.
What do you say? Do you point that out, or what do you say?
Sure, yeah, I will. So I could just repeat it back, or I could do what's called metacommunication, which is to say, I noticed that you didn't roll again. I'm wondering if maybe you don't believe you could get something good. And again, I'm not asking a question. I'm just saying, I wonder, I guess. And they may not say anything, and that's fine. I don't need to pressure for that. I'm just planting the idea. Because the other thing about, in a lot of theories, but adlerian specifically, is we're trying to help the client gain insight. And so that's why we narrate some things or meta-communicate things that we've noticed. Because so many people do things that they're totally unaware of. That's how they do things.
Yeah.
So if you point it out gently and with compassion, then someone might say, oh, I didn't realize I did that. I don't like that. I want to change that. So yeah, something simple like a zombie dice game, I can get a lot just from that. If I have a family, I'm going to make them play a cooperative game.
Why?
Because I want to see how well they can do it. I want to see. So a cooperative game, for example, would be Forbidden Desert or Forbidden Island.
Okay.
Probably ones that I go to a lot. Which is just, you're on an island. You have to get treasure before it sinks into the ocean.
And you're all working together.
You're all working together. You
against the game.
All win or you all lose. And it's very interesting if I have a family, because I've seen it where, okay, you're all working together, but they'll introduce competition.
Oh, sure.
Siblings will do that. Sometimes the parents and child will do that. Let's see, does someone take charge right away? How does everyone respond to that? If we all lose, does blame start getting thrown around? That kind of thing. Gives me a lot on the family dynamic.
And then again, do you kind of narrate some of those things?
Sometimes it depends.
Or you just write it down in your notes?
Yeah. If I'm very early, sometimes I might reflect or track, but I'm building rapport. A little later phase, then yeah, I'm definitely going to be metacommunicating that. The one family that comes to mind when I've used a board game, I used Settlers of Catan way back. 3 brothers could not get along. And I'm saying, you all win. This is supposed to be one person wins, anyone loses. I said, all 3 of you win if you can beat me.
Oh, there you go.
And they couldn't do it for the longest time. They could not do it. They would let me shift focus off of me and put it back on to competing with each other. And I'm saying, as I'm doing it, even before I say something, I'm like, I'm going to try and make you do something against him. And they fell for it for a while. But after a while, it started getting better. And then after I helped them gain insight about what happens in the game, I'm going to say, let's take this to the real world. To the point of, I've had 2 moments. That was one of them where a parent comes and said, what did you do? It's like, I don't know, what did I do? They're not fighting anymore. What did you do? And I'm like, we played a game. I pointed stuff out.
Why do you think that's so helpful? Like, why do you think that it's helpful for kids to be doing some of these things in session? And then, like, how does it translate to the real world?
One reason I think it's helpful is because they're able to... So many times, if kids are when people want a behavior correct or correct behavior that a kid has, it's not, it's done through scolding. It's done through lecturing. It's done through...
It's all cognitive.
Yeah, it's all cognitive. This, first of all, is a medium that's more attractive to them. And the way I take it to the real world is once I've established that rapport, once I've helped them gain insight, then I'm going to say something like, I noticed that this happened in the game, and I wonder, or maybe I'm guessing that this happens not just when we play games. Guessing there's other times that something like this has happened. And now we can start a dialogue. Once you get to phase, so Adlerian has 4 phases. Adler loves 4. The 4th phase is when there's a little bit more talking.
Okay. And you go through the phases with the clients? Okay.
Yeah, so I'm trying to build rapport. I'm assessing lifestyle. I'm helping them gain insight. And then the 4th phase is called reorientation, re-education. We're still going to practice, but it's a lot of skill practice. Like all the stuff we've been building on. Now let's practice these skills. Let's take them to the real world. Let's get you where you want to be.
And it's about the experience.
Yes.
It's like you can tell 3 siblings to get along better, but it's like all they've ever known is how to compete and not get along. They don't really know what to change to get along. They don't trust that if I do it as an individual, they're going to do it too. They're worried about losing then, if that ends up being the case. And they don't have any sense or reference of like, what's the incentive in doing that? What's the incentive in me changing to get along better with my siblings? But when you put them in that dynamic and they experience the effect of getting along better with their siblings and how much better it feels, it's like now they have a new reference point that they can look to and reconsider how they go about engaging with them moving forward.
And it's a reference point that I can reference.
Yeah.
Like, we got in a fight. Well, remember when you did this? You were able to get along really well to accomplish that.
I love the Settlers of Catan example and like making them work together, the cooperative games. I think that's brilliant. Do you do a lot of family sessions then?
Yeah.
Okay.
I work a lot. I do a little, I've done... I do plenty of individual, I do plenty of family.
Probably like a mix of both, even with
both.
clients.
Yeah.
Sure.
Even couples I've done play therapy with.
Really? So you mentioned, I want to, before we jump into that, because I feel like you keep saying things and I'm like, we need to get back to that. We need to keep talking about that. But what are some other games or things that you would recommend therapists have? So
I said... like a dollhouse, having smart supplies can be a good thing. Do so at your own discretion. I used to have a lot more variety than I do now, just based on what I wanted to deal with.
Like glitter?
Like glitter. Glitter, once it gets places, it never leaves.
No.
So if I use glitter now, it's not in my office. It's outside of my office. Play-Doh is another one, actually. I like Play-Doh a lot, but... kids want to mix it up. They want to, it gets in carpets. It gets in, so if you don't want to deal with that.
You can't tell them they can't do that in play therapy.
Right. I mean, you can, but I don't want to create that many.
Yeah, then you're just another parent.
Right, right. There are, and don't get me wrong, there are still some limits. My closet is arranged in a way, my toy closet, I need a second one actually, but the one I have right now is arranged to basically what I tell kids is that when they say, what can I play with? I was like, you can play with what you can reach. So there's stuff that's meant for some older kids. It's up high.
Yeah.
I don't want 3-year-olds going for that.
Sure. That makes sense.
So, I mean, that's one limit I have, but I haven't really had a problem with that.
Let's switch.
Let me circle back to answering your original question. So having art supplies, games that I have. So I have a few, like what I call infect vectors. Zombie Dice is one. Forbidden Island is one. A game called Tsuro, Tsuro. which is about being a dragon and being on a path and trying to stay on the board while there's other dragons on a path trying to stay on the board. And eventually you'll either run into each other or you'll be forced off. And so it's kind of being like, okay, I can make a plan, but I have to be spontaneous and flexible at the same time.
Do you play a lot of these games?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And so like I think that's a big piece too to point out is like the congruency between how you play as a play therapist with clients and just who you are as a person and an individual.
Yeah.
Because you can't pretend to be a play therapist. I did that for a year. It was painful. It was hard. I was just doing existential talk therapy with these second graders. And I was constantly just having their parents come in to do couples therapy, which I kept getting in trouble for because we were in an elementary school. But
you could see that was more of the issue.
Yeah. It's like, and I could tell that's where I'd be more effective in helping this kiddo. And so like when you're identifying the games that you play, and that doesn't necessarily mean play the games that Neal plays,
right?
Because you choose those games because you know how to leverage them. Like you get the imagination that was put into these games and how to use that to create metaphors. And so it's like the games you choose to situate in your office, the toys, like it's be things that you're familiar with, that you yourself can play with actively. And that's probably more what it's about than, getting a concretized list of
such
these
a good
items.
point. Yes. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Also, get some stuff that you discover your clientele is interested in.
Yeah.
I have Fortnite figures because kids play Fortnite. I have a Minecraft game and figures.
I'm so good at Fortnite.
Are you?
Well, I can
really
beat
good
my 8-year-old daughter, but not my 11-year-old son just runs circles.
I was going to
around
say, there are kids who I'm just like, dang. Like right now, me and my friends, when we play, it's like, kids need to go back to school because they're getting all the wins right now. We can't get
funny.
But that is significant. Like I never played video games ever at any point in my life. I always thought they were stupid and a waste of time. But when my son started getting really into Fortnite and I started playing with him to enter into his world, it did so much for our relationship. I learned so much about him and his world. And it added an element to our relationship that nothing else could have if it weren't for me stepping into his world and on his terms.
Yep.
That's a really good point. And it's something that you taught me like a year and a half ago because I interviewed Neal for the social media post that we were making. And it was the first time we had ever talked. But I had asked you a question about like, what if parents don't like playing with their kids or like have a hard time playing with their kids? What advice would you give them?
Sure.
And you had like, do you remember what you had said or what your advice
Not
is
specifically.
typically?
I have an answer now, but I don't remember my specific answer.
Tell me what your answer would be.
So if parents have trouble playing or being involved with their kids, I mean, first of all, step into their world. Figure out what they are interested in and just be there and be a part of it. You don't necessarily have to participate right away, but also be willing to let them teach you something.
Yeah.
And on top of, and then other than that, like if you can just be there, like I teach parents how to track, just be like, oh, I noticed you're doing that right now or restate content. Being present is the most important thing and not being judgmental.
And you said the same thing before too, but I think that has helped me. That advice from a year and a half ago has helped me as a parent. And it's also helped me as a therapist because I think to myself, like, how can I just be present in this moment with this kid? How can I just like leave my agenda, leave, like this is what I was planning on doing for this session, or this is what I really want my 2-year-old to, I would rather play with this puzzle, but clearly she's not interested. And just being able to take a step back and be like, what's actually going to be helpful for this relationship and what she's going to find more fun is if I just follow what she wants to do. And right now that is just changing her baby doll's diaper 100 times a day. And then just being okay with that.
And that's, I talked about like child-centered and that's most of what they do, but adlerian early phase, that's what we do. It's like, okay, child-led. What do you explore the playroom and let me just be in it with you. And I teach, I've also done parent-child interactive therapy. And that's like the first part of that is just like teaching parents, like, don't ask questions, don't give commands, let the child lead. And just be present.
Yeah.
and show that you're present by. So when we talk about narrating, like, because I feel like I've badmouthed narrating a little bit, the reason you do it is to say to the kid, I'm here. You matter. I see you. I hear you.
Yeah, you're just pointing out not to use it as an exclusive intervention because that gets robotic and annoying and kind of aimless if that's all you're ever doing.
Yeah.
It depends on your theory. Because I'm not going to, again, child-centered, it's not my theory, but it's been the main for so long and it's done good. I don't want to say it isn't. I just don't think that narrating is, because they would say doing that is necessary and sufficient. I'm saying it's necessary. It's not always sufficient. Sometimes it is, but not always.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like if I were to be having a conversation with you and I just repeated back to you everything that you said, you know, like
I'd be like, I would just stop talking to you.
Yeah. I mean, for real, it's like when you learn motivational interviewing and like the summarizing or some of those different reflecting things, whatever. And then you just only do that. And then you're like, sure, MI is helpful, but there are things like you need to go a little further than that.
You need to be a human with your own thoughts, autonomy and input.
What I'm hearing you say is, I'm just kidding.
Correct. Yeah. You're, no hearing problems on your end, Parker. Audio's coming through clean. I think one of the most important questions that I always ask young parents or new parents or parents approaching parenthood is like, how do you remember grown-ups playing with you as a kid? How do you remember playing as a kid? Because a lot of grown-ups don't know how to play.
They don't.
And that might be because they never really played or they never saw what it looks like for a grown-up to play.
I think the second one especially because, I mean, heck, I forgot how to play for a while.
Yeah.
And so adults do lose that. You're told at some point, like, okay, I remember a point when I played with toys. And then when it started transition, when I was like going to middle school, and then my parents are like, okay, we're not going to get you that anymore. You're growing out of it. Now I collect toys again. So
that wasn't very adlerian of them.
Right. Well, this was before my dad was an adlerian psychologist. He was a band director at the time.
Okay.
That's powerful though, Lucas. Like just even thinking about how did adults play with you? How did you play as a kid? And
because so many times I think the answer is, if you ask an adult, how did adults play with you when you were a kid? The answer I think most of the time is they didn't.
Yeah, they didn't. And that's something I certainly had to figure out as a young father was how to play. And I would say what really helped was when I stopped thinking about it in the terms of how do I play with my son and more so just how do I play again? And really examining, like, were there any aspects of my life where I was actually playing and being playful and just finding joy in things? And there hadn't been because I was a grad student for like ever, and life was busy. It was stressful. I had jobs and, you get lost in that. But one of Carl Whitaker's tips for helping therapists stay emotionally alive is to always be childish and playful with your mate, and play with your mate, and never stop playing. And that's what keeps, kind of that childlike energy alive in us, which can be a huge catalyst to connecting with the children in our lives.
The other thing I tell people a lot is take notice of how kids treat metaphor. So kids play in metaphor all the time. But are they the kind of person who is going to be coming out of it, or are they going to be the person who's always going to stay in it? Example. I was at a family gathering with my nieces and my wife's mother, my mother-in-law. And then the girls are playing. They're playing with Frozen, like they have a Frozen castle, and they have Elsa and Anna and all the characters. It's great. And we get there, and I see that Grandma, my mother-in-law, is playing with them, and the characters are getting into conflict. Grandma comes out of the metaphor and is like, "Oh, wait, we don't, that's not how we treat people." And I'm thinking, they're not treating people that way their characters are.
I can't believe that people have the audacity to play in front of you, Neal.
I know,
Aren't
right?
they just expecting you to psychoanalyze everything?
Strangely enough, no. Well, no, because with the kids, I just play with them.
Yeah.
It's the adults I'm psychoanalyzing.
Oh, sure. So then when you saw Grandma do this.
When I saw Grandma do this, what I wanted to do is just be like, stop breaking the metaphor and just stay in it with them.
I love it.
I didn't because it wouldn't have mattered.
You can't tell your mother-in-law what to do.
No, I cannot, much as I'd love to. But that's the point. It's like, okay, if the kid wants to stay in the metaphor, stay in the metaphor. So if I'm playing as a character, I'm not going to address the kid and be like, well, what are you, and talked about what they're playing. I'm going to address the character as my character. I'm staying in the metaphor.
This is a really good distinction. Yes, this is so important.
Now, there are kids who will go in and out, you'll be playing it and then they'll come out and say, hey, what do you think if we did this? Then I can do that. I'm following their lead though, when it comes to metaphor. Then you have kids who won't do metaphor at all. I don't have as many of them, but I have some kids that are very, very, very literal. If I do a sand tray with them, they'll put a horse in there. I'll be like, well, what is that supposed to be? It's a horse.
It's a horse in a desert.
It's a horse in a desert. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Stop patronizing me.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, we're not doing metaphors. Cool.
Yeah. So what do you do with those kids? It seems like play therapy would be a lot harder for kids that don't do metaphors.
So I'm not going to do a lot of like things where I want them to create stories. I'm going to introduce ones that already exist. A lot of those kids, I can still do a lot of artistic stuff with them because they'll draw me stuff that just really happened. That's fine. Or they'll do sand trays. It's just like, okay, I have to realize with this person, I'm not going to ask you a lot of questions about, because normally I'm not going to label things. When someone does a sand tray, I'm not going to say, oh, what's the horse? Because I don't want to say it's a horse until you tell me it is. But if I realize they're really literal, I'll be like, okay, so this looks like a family. Kind of looks like your family. Because then they'll be like, yeah. So I want to take note of that. You're taking a lot of leads from your clients because it's about them at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And while I have agendas, I want to send the message to them because my job is not, you do not need me to fix you. You don't need to be fixed. You're not broken. I'm just here to offer you some tools and you have the power to make it work. That's what I want them to realize because so many adults in their lives tell them what to do, how to think. And I'm there to say, think how you want.
Yeah, be free.
Yeah.
It's like this is a canvas, and you get to create whatever you want in here. And I think a lot of emerging play therapists need to kind of just get that pep talk too of convincing them that what they're doing is truly therapeutic.
Yes.
And that at the end of the day, it's like the relationship in and of itself will always be therapeutic. It's like you could bank on that, but you're creating an experience of play that isn't replicated in any other dimension of their life at all. And that's what's therapeutic about it.
Yeah. The one thing I add to that when I talk to emerging play therapists is like, be intentional. Have a reason for what you're doing, or at least an inkling of a reason of what you're doing. Because again, if you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, you're not like,
you're wasting spaghetti.
How do you write a case note about that?
How do you write a case note about that? But also, if you're being intentional, be willing to make stuff up.
Yeah.
Because when I took a class with Terry, that was one of the things she said to us was like, look, all the stuff that you're reading that I wrote, I just made it up. So I give you permission to make up interventions, to make up activities. Everything that's psychological in this world, somebody made up. So go do that.
So for therapists that are interested in becoming play therapists, what are some resources, tools that you would recommend?
Sure.
Go to a wedding with Terry.
Yeah.
Go to a wedding with Terry Cottman, yeah. So first of all, if you want to know like all the what you need to do, I think the website is a4pt.org, which is, or just look up Association for Play Therapy.
I can put the link in the description too.
They have their outlines. If you want to be a registered play therapist, which again, you don't need to do play therapy, but if you want to be registered, there's a whole, you need the right kind of education courses, which if you take a master's level counseling course or LMFT or any of that, you'll get all that. Then you have to take play therapy specific courses. and you have to do play therapy, and you have to be supervised. They do it in a weird tier system where it's like, okay, first tier, you need this many hours of doing it, this many hours of education, and this many hours of supervision before you can move on to the next tier. But it takes about 2 years to get that credential.
Yeah.
Classes, every year, the Play Therapy Association for Play Therapy does a convention, a national one, where you can go and take tons of classes. Cool. But they're also, look it up. They're all over the place. So yeah, do you need the certification? No. Does it open some doors for you? Yes. Yes, it does.
Like what?
So
getting on the Thrival Guide podcast.
Yes, exactly. That is number one right there. There's a couple people in my office who are still building caseloads. They're like, "Oh, I'm trying to build caseloads." For me, I'm like, that is never hard.
Well, since you're a registered play therapist, does that mean you're on like their website so then people can look up play therapists and find you that way too? Sure.
There are people who are looking specifically for play therapists.
Yep.
When I was looking for therapy for my kiddo, like I was very intentional to find someone who was a registered play therapist.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And there's not a ton of them.
No, there wasn't.
Well, because it's a process
yes,
to get
it's a process.
License or to get registered that way. No, that makes sense.
So there's a whole lot you can do. So like I said, you could just take a few courses and be like, oh, I want to know how to do Sandtray, or I want to know how to do just some basic play therapy stuff because I work with kids. Great, do that. Or maybe you're really gung ho and like I want to be registered. I want to know all the things. I want to, because you also have to, like your licensure, you have to do continuing education to keep the registration going. Be it either attending classes or teaching them, which I've done a couple times.
No, that makes sense. I feel like we need to have you back on to talk specifically about Sandtray and then also like how to be doing play therapy with couples or adults.
Oh, I would do that.
I think that
that'd be a good one.
Especially because we're releasing this episode in August because it's Children's Mental Health Month, but October we're going to be doing a bunch of content all around couples therapy, and so I'm like, dang, I need to have you back, Neal. This is so good.
I would do it.
Yeah.
Because I've used play therapy with adults. And Sandtray. I could talk a whole time about Sandtray.
I love it. Yeah.
I could talk a whole time about like, I've thought about doing like even a thing in my own content creation of being like, I'm going to make a video about a board game once a week. Be like, here's something you can play with your family that would be fun for you.
That's cool.
Or doing something on, here's how you get involved in video games if you aren't in that world at all.
Any other last tips, advice for therapists that are interested in doing play therapy?
Be willing to go into it have an open mind. Be willing to, get down on the floor, to let the child lead sometimes, to make stuff up. Learn to do a few voices.
That's good. Yeah. Like your little Texas girl accent.
Like my little Texas, yeah. But, just a few character voices here and there it's amazing to me how much that can like I've seen when I will adopt a different voice, they get into it. They love do a voice. Oh, geez. Okay. So if I'm doing like a really menacing voice, I might talk like this.
Oh, that's good.
And make them think that something dark and evil is lurking around the corner. Something like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I love it.
I'm just not built to be a play therapist.
Absolutely.
I have one voice. That's so good.
And I do that. You can do that. I can talk through action figures or puppets. I'm not a huge, but I have some puppets that I've, for some reason I have a dragon who talks like he's an old British man, even though he's just a three-headed dragon.
That's just his voice.
I don't know why. That's just his voice now.
Oh my gosh.
3 heads, 1 voice.
Yeah,
it's British.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining, Neal. This has been
great.
So much good information, and I'm excited to have you back soon.
I'm excited to be back.
And when I make my first movie trailer, you'll be doing the voiceover.
Yes,
I would love that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.